The second Georgi said the word broke, and the second Jovi commented on Yara's looks, the room changed. Not louder, colder. You could feel everyone freeze because those were not playful jabs, those were social detonations. The kind people drop when patience runs out and pride takes the wheel. And the scary part is not what was said. It is why those words came out at all. Because once money and appearance enter a fight, the fight is no longer about love. It turns into control. What made this hit harder is how fast it escalated. 1 minute, people were pretending to function like adults on a trip. The next, dignity was bleeding on camera. Georgi did not raise his voice. He did not insult style or age. He went straight for finances. And when someone attacks money, they are not talking about cash. They are talking about power. Who pays? Who owes? Who gets to decide? That accusation did not come out of nowhere. It came out of frustration that had been building quietly while everyone focused on outfits and smiles. And then Jovi followed with his own version of the same mistake. Different topic, same energy, appearance, past photos, a comment framed as honesty, but landing like disrespect. And once again, the timing mattered. This was not a private moment. This was not care. This was said in front of others, which means the goal was not clarity. The goal was dominance. Whether intentional or not, that is how it reads. When you embarrass your partner publicly, you are sending a message about who holds the upper hand. Here is where the tension locks in. Who lost control first? The person who exposed money, or the person who exposed insecurity? Because both moments share the same root. Fear of losing relevance, fear of being seen as replaceable, fear of being exposed without the armor they usually wear. And this is the moment where every small detail you missed starts to matter later. What makes this even more uncomfortable is how everyone else reacted. Silence, nervous laughter, side glances. Nobody stepped in right away. And that tells you something. These dynamics were not new. People sensed the pressure long before it exploded. The comments only confirmed what had been floating under the surface for weeks. There is also a quiet promise hidden in these moments. Right now it feels obvious who crossed the line. It feels easy to pick sides. But as the story moves forward, these same scenes will look different. Motives will shift. Context will grow. And what sounds cruel at first will later reveal panic. That does not excuse the behavior, but it explains it. Because when relationships stop feeling safe, people stop protecting each other. They protect themselves. And once that switch flips, the damage is rarely about the words. It is about why those words were finally chosen. Right before this blow-up, the episode had already been quietly setting the stage, not with shouting, with pressure. The kind that builds when money stays vague and plans stay half-said. The trip looked fine on the surface. Smiles, traditions, group energy. But underneath, there was a tug-of-war over who decides and who pays. Georgi had been hinting about independence. Darcey had been hinting about security. Stacy had been hovering close enough to turn hints into alarms. What stood out is how money kept floating in the background without numbers. No budgets. No timelines. Only assumptions. Designer bags appear. Homes stay theoretical. Travel looks glamorous. Stability feels postponed. Nobody says it directly, but the imbalance shows. When people feel unsure about finances, they lean harder into image. When image cracks, embarrassment rushes in fast. That is how small comments turn explosive. The control piece shows up here too. Decisions about travel. Decisions about living arrangements. Decisions about who gets informed and when. Each choice looks minor on its own. Together they form a pattern. One person holds information. Another demands reassurance. A third amplifies fear. And suddenly a conversation turns into a courtroom without rules. There is also something quietly awkward about how public this all becomes. These are not private kitchen table talks. These moments play out in front of family and friends. That changes behavior. People perform. They posture. They protect their pride more than their partner. Once that happens, listening stops. And if you look closely, this was never about one comment. It was about months of tension waiting for the right spark. The humor lands in the denial. Everyone insists everything is fine while doing the opposite, smiling while arguing, joking while seething, acting surprised when the mood collapses. It is almost predictable, and that is the open loop here. If money keeps getting danced around, an image keeps getting defended, these blow-ups are not accidents, they are scheduled. What aired on screen looked like a simple disagreement about plans. What showed up underneath told a different story. Georgi talked about needing time, space, and money handled his way. Darcey heard distance, secrecy, and abandonment. Both reacted to different fears, and neither slowed down enough to hear the other. When Georgi spoke in short answers, his body language closed off. Arms tight, tone flat. That signals overload, not confidence. Darcey filled the silence fast. Her voice rose. Her words stacked. That signals panic, not control. Then Stacy stepped closer. At first she framed her input as concern, then curiosity, then certainty. Each comment added pressure. Each look reinforced suspicion. What started as a couple problem turned into a group judgment. Georgi noticed. You could see it when he stopped explaining and started defending. Once someone feels outnumbered, honesty feels unsafe. That does not excuse hiding plans. It explains why walls go up. Every scene ended without relief. No resolution. Only sharper edges. Georgi talked about money without details. Darcey demanded clarity without patience. Stacy interpreted gaps as proof. Each reaction fed the next. Receipts showed up through behavior, not words. Interrupted sentences, eye rolls, timing of questions, who spoke for whom. Those details matter more than claims. Here is the reframe. In my opinion, this was not a scam story or a gold digger story. This looked like two adults stuck in a power loop. One controls information to stay steady. The other escalates emotion to feel secure. Both lose ground. Stacy did not create the issue. She magnified it. Her presence turned uncertainty into urgency. And once trust starts leaking this way, every silence feels louder than any argument. Empathy belongs on both sides. Georgi felt unheard. Darcey felt unsafe. Those feelings clash fast. Still, feelings do not excuse public pressure or hidden planning. Each choice pushed the other further away. By the time voices rose, the real damage had already happened. The argument only exposed it. By the time the argument circled back to money again, it was no longer about bills or income. It was about leverage. Who gets to walk away first? Who needs whom more? The broke accusation landed the way it did because it questioned status, not balance sheets. In this dynamic, money equals security, and security equals worth. Once that connection forms, every disagreement feels existential. It is easy to assume Georgi used that word to wound. It is also easy to assume Darcey heard it as an attack on her success. Both assumptions miss the deeper fear underneath. Georgi has always existed on unstable ground in this relationship. Different country, different earning power. Different age expectations. When stability feels borrowed, pride becomes fragile. Words sharpen faster. On the other side, Darcey's fear is losing control of the future she is trying to build. If money slips, image slips. If image slips, relevance feels threatened. This is where the opening moment deserves a second look. That comment did not come from confidence. It came from pressure, from realizing that control was already shifting and trying to grab it back. That does not make it kind. It makes it human. The problem is that once fear speaks, it rarely uses careful language. Age plays quietly into this too, not as a number, but as expectation. Who should already be settled? Who should still be figuring it out? Dependency gets weaponized without being named. Pride fills the gaps where reassurance should live. Nobody says these things out loud, but they drive the tension forward. And the more this stays unspoken, the more explosive the next moment becomes. What makes this hard to resolve is that both sides feel exposed in different ways. One fears being seen as replaceable, the other fears being seen as responsible for everything. When power replaces partnership, money stops being a resource and starts being a threat. Once the setting shifts and more people enter the frame, everything tightens. The volume does not go up, but the pressure does. Private tension becomes public performance. Suddenly, every pause feels longer. Every joke lands flatter. You can sense people choosing their words carefully while also failing to hide their discomfort. This is where relationships get dangerous, not loud. In group settings, nobody wants to look weak. So instead of resolving anything, people protect their image. That is why comments get sharper, but quieter. Smiles stay fixed while eyes harden. The embarrassment does more damage than shouting ever could. When someone feels judged by an audience, they stop being honest and start being strategic. The awkwardness becomes shared. Viewers feel it too because we have all been in that room. The one where everyone pretends the vibe is fine while mentally counting the minutes until escape. The humor that slips in is tight and uncomfortable, the kind that exists only to break tension. It works for a second, then dissolves. What matters here is behavior, not blame. Who interrupts? Who overexplains? Who suddenly jokes when things get real? Those are tells. And once they appear, the power dynamic shifts again. The person trying hardest to control perception usually feels the least secure. And when embarrassment replaces conversation, the fallout becomes inevitable. Nobody storms out. Nobody screams. But respect thins out in real time. Each glance becomes a quiet verdict. Each laugh feels slightly forced. The stakes rise not because of anger, but because dignity is slipping in front of witnesses. The ski trip changes the pace, but the tension only grows. Jovi's comments land differently in this environment. It is not shouting, it is testing. Testing limits, boundaries, and patience. Every glance he shoots Yara carries weight. Every offhand remark feels calibrated to see what sticks. It is subtle, but the camera catches it, and that subtlety makes the discomfort sharper. You feel it even if you are sitting miles away. Yara's reaction is quiet but powerful. She does not explode. She measures, she hesitates, and she sets invisible lines. That restraint draws the audience in. It creates empathy, because anyone watching can imagine themselves in her position. The insecurity is personal, but the scenario is public. That combination turns small comments into emotional detonations. Here, behavior drives the story more than words. Jovi's tone, posture, and timing speak louder than the sentence he delivers. Yara's response, the pause before she answers, the sideways glance, the barely audible sigh, they all communicate volumes. It is a study in emotional chess. And just when you think it will settle, the next interaction threatens to undo all restraint. The audience senses the stakes. Nobody wants to tip the balance first, but every action edges the trip toward confrontation. Insecurity, curiosity, and social pressure collide. Each participant's choice becomes a ripple that may erupt later. This is why the ski trip feels like a turning point. It is quiet, tense, and loaded with potential for fallout. Once the group games start, the dynamic shifts again. Alcohol loosens tongues, jokes land differently, and respect becomes a fragile thing. Nobody raises a hand, but the undercurrents are loud. Each laugh, Each tease, each half-smile carries judgment. The camera captures it, and so do we. The subtle cracks in behavior that were private now show in real time. Patterns emerge when you watch closely. Comments that seemed harmless in private start to echo the same power struggles we saw in other episodes. The same insecurities flare. The same need to assert control. And the same moments where someone feels exposed and reacts instinctively. Watching it unfold, you begin to notice repetition, not just mistakes, but predictable ways people navigate tension. The humor is sharper because it is uncomfortable. It is not cruel, it is revealing. Observing how each person negotiates social space shows who values status, who values privacy, and who prioritizes attention. Every joke that lands wrong reinforces a hierarchy, and every reaction highlights it. And just as you start thinking this is harmless fun, someone crosses an invisible line and the tension spikes again. By the end of the games, viewers can map behavior across the room. Parallels appear between couples. Control, insecurity, and image management play out like a game in slow motion. You realize that public embarrassment and private tension are not separate. They feed each other. Each slip, each sidelong glance, each laugh becomes a thread connecting past episodes to this one, giving the audience a deeper sense of stakes and pattern recognition. Yara does not respond with shouting or theatrics. Her expression tightens, a quiet tension that carries more weight than any words. She steps back slightly, measuring the space between what was said and what it means. The room feels smaller, heavier. Every movement matters. Jovi notices, and instead of addressing the tension directly, he sidesteps, makes a joke, and shifts the energy. That deflection speaks volumes. The emotional weight is in the gaps. The pauses, the unsaid, the subtle micro-reactions. The audience picks up on these faster than anyone in the room. You feel Yara's frustration and discomfort, but also the restraint she imposes on herself. Her control contrasts with Jovi's evasive behavior, and that contrast drives a complicated mix of empathy, irritation, and curiosity. It is hard to watch and easy to relate to. Many have been in situations where someone avoids responsibility, and yet the consequences fall on the person with the quietest voice. Watching her navigate that is tense and layered. You want to look away, but the story hooks you deeper. This moment is about more than an offhand comment. It echoes the financial and control struggles we saw earlier, making the stakes feel personal across the room. The audience begins to draw comparisons. Power dynamics, hidden agendas, and social pressure repeat themselves in different settings. Behavior patterns, once subtle, become obvious. You notice who bends, who deflects, who absorbs stress, and who inflates minor moments into conflict. By framing the fallout with careful attention, viewers stay tethered to emotional beats while anticipating the payoff in the next interaction. As the episode reaches its final stretch, the threads begin to intersect. Money, respect, and control are no longer separate battles. They collide in every glance, every word, every gesture. Georgi's earlier accusations take on new shades. It wasn't just about cash, it was about leverage, about who feels entitled, and who quietly carries the weight of consequences. Darcey's reactions suddenly make sense, not as overreactions, but as protective maneuvers in a system that repeatedly tests her limits. Meanwhile, Jovi's teasing, which felt crude at first, now reads differently. Yara's measured responses reveal boundaries and self-respect. What looked like a careless comment early in the episode transforms into a mirror, reflecting discomfort and subtle power plays. The audience can see how small provocations ripple outward, affecting the larger group dynamics. Each interaction becomes a case study in human behavior under stress. The reversal hits when the person who seemed confident and untouchable earlier shows cracks. Pride, composure, and self-assurance dissolve in ways no one expected, and the one who appeared vulnerable, mocked, or dismissed gains new depth. You realize context changes everything, appearances can mislead, and judgment without understanding fails. By the end, there's resolution in insight, if not in action, and the episode leaves you thinking about control, image, and respect long after the cameras stop rolling. What started as two separate flashpoints, the money argument and the appearance comment, now converge into a narrative about human behavior, boundaries, and perception. The audience leaves with a sense of closure on emotional arcs, but questions remain. Who truly holds power in these relationships? Who is navigating wisely, and who is merely reacting? The payoff comes not in neat answers, but in recognizing patterns, motivations, and the subtle shifts that define how people interact when stakes are high. This final weave sets the stage for the next episode, where hidden tensions are bound to surface again, and the smallest provocations could trigger entirely new conflicts. You leave the story with curiosity, reflection, and an eagerness to see which cracks will widen first. The episode closes with a tightening of energy. All the earlier tension, the money disputes, the subtle power shifts, the awkward comments, settles into a pattern of consequences rather than a list of events. You can feel who lost control, who recalibrated, and who carried the weight of restraint. Each person's choices ripple outward, leaving impressions that linger beyond what you saw on screen. Georgi's earlier forcefulness now reads as an attempt to assert clarity, while Darcey's careful navigation shows how patience can both protect and frustrate. Yara's measured stance contrasts sharply with Jovi's evasions, highlighting how deflection can heighten tension even when no words are exchanged. The story leaves a residue of unanswered emotional questions: who will adapt, who will misstep, and who will finally face the consequences of their behavior. The lingering tension isn't resolved. It hovers just outside the frame, making the audience wonder what will happen when image and reality collide even more directly in the next chapter. As the credits roll, viewers are left absorbing the lessons of control, respect, and social perception, all while anticipating the next moment when these dynamics will ignite again. This is where the next story picks up, promising that the battles between appearance and accountability are far from over, and that the smallest spark could reveal the deepest truths.